my name is Debbie Anderson, and I am so delighted to offer you a very warm welcome to tonight's this is the fifth in our series, Journeys to Justice, which is co-sponsored by the churches of Claremont and Goodwood United Churches. Our featured guest speaker tonight is Reverend Murray Pruden, and we are so delighted to have him with us tonight. He's going to talk about land, relationships, and listening. And our moderator, Reverend Lionel Kedla, will be introducing him more fully in a moment. But I do want to start by acknowledging that we are all seated on lands which remain home to a number of Indigenous nations and people whose relationship with the land remains central to their lives. May we all awaken to new opportunities to walk in justice and reconciliation with the first people of this land. And could we start with a little prayer? Creator God, source of all that is, bless all who have gathered here tonight to listen and to learn. May we be people of peace who live from a place of justice and join our voices with others who want to give birth to new ways of being in this world. Amen. And before I hand you over to Reverend Lionel, I would like just to say, let's all remain muted through the service so as not to be distracting. And if you're able to stop your video so that we can save bandwidth as well, that would be helpful. And now I'll turn it over to Reverend Lionel.
Thank you, Debbie. Hello, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm Lionel Ketla, the minister serving both at Goodwood United Church and at Claremont United Church. And it's delightful to have all of you joining us this evening, along with our special guest for this evening. So we're thrilled to have Reverend Murray Pruden with us this evening. And Reverend Murray Pruden is the current National Executive Minister for Indigenous Ministries and Justice with the United Church of Canada. And so Murray, it's really wonderful to have you with us. Murray describes himself as a leader and as a person of faith and spirituality who's grown to a role of storytelling and being a person of inspiration. So we welcome your words, your stories, and all that you will share this evening. And we invite you, if there's anything else you would like to share about yourself by way of introduction, we welcome those words at this time as well. So good to have you with us. And I'm going to pin you and unpin myself.
Thank you, Lionel. Thank you for that introduction and greetings, everyone. Danse. How are you? Hopefully you're well. I am well myself, and I'm happy to be a part of this group this evening. Out to you on the east side of the country. I'm online here on Zoom on the west side of the country. I'm on the West Coast. I'm currently living in Vancouver, British Columbia, Lower Mainland area, in the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coast Salish territory, specifically in the area that I'm in. I am Cree from the Treaty 6 territory in Alberta. My family has lived there for generations. I come from the Goodfish Lake Saddle Lake First Nations. As I introduce myself in a way that formally, in the respects of lineage to my family, I am the son of Henry and Evelyn Pruden of Smoky Lake, Alberta, and my grandparents, all late in the spirit world, Betsy and Charlie Pruden, and Douglas and Florence Steinhauer. And I recognize myself on my mother's side of the family. And I am fourth generation to Reverend Henry Bird Steinhauer. He's my ancestor. And we talk about our generations, and we talk about our family lineage to say who we are and where we're from, so that it's clear that we we have roots, we have connection and relations in many forms and ways. And hopefully tonight I can share that identification together. A little bit about myself. I'm just a very simple man. I don't ask for too much, and I'm always willing to give when asked to. As tonight, I was very honored and blessed to have the opportunity to talk about this subject to a good group of people here, and willing to also to hear your reflections to some of the words that I'm going to share tonight. Um, about myself too, I guess yeah, I'm enjoying being in Vancouver, but I know that I may go other places in this on this land, and really happy to do so when called to. So thank you, and it's a blessing to be here. So I guess I'll just go right into our discussion tonight, because I know we have a short time, and I like to talk. I guess that's a little bit about me. I do like to talk, and I do like to share. I do like to do storytelling, and that's a little bit about me. Part of what I've realized in the other stages of my seminary, after I've received my call to ministry, was like my background is in the dramatic arts and theater, and in very creative, the creative side of myself, and I express this very well, and I always find my good soul connection to to theater, to music, to the arts, and it really came very forward to me in the early stages of my seminary, as I mentioned, that I needed to bring that connection to who I am, and it was just a reminder to me that, hey, I know we like to share stories in my traditions. We do tell stories not only through dance and music, but just orally. We tell our stories to one another, because the stories aren't ours per se. That when we do have stories, we need to share them, and because that's how our history gets told. We come from a very oral tradition, not necessarily coordinated firstly by written text or anything. It's a spoken language. It's a spoken way of being, and it's very much fundamental to who I am. And as we go into our topics, the connection to the land, because the land, in all her beauty and sacredness and wonders, really has taught my people, the Cree people, and various indigenous peoples across this land, of who we are, taught us our languages, gave us our languages, and gave us a way of communicating to her, to creation, and to creator. So let me start off, and of course, let me start off with a story. And I do have a very short, and I do say short, PowerPoint presentation, because it's only 2 slides. So, but that will be filtered out through throughout my talk here tonight with you. But I want to start with a story, and it was a story that my dad shared with me several years ago, various years ago. I don't want to age myself, but it was probably in my late teens, early 20s at the time. My dad decided to share this story with me, and he was talking about being on the land. My parents moved away from the reserve to make a living for themselves, be part of society, lived in an urban setting. I've learned a lot about the urban lifestyle, as well as keeping my traditions with back home with my grandparents and family as well. But when my dad left, he always had some needs to always go back, and always wanting to go back, and he taught us about going back. Well, one day he was sharing a story about the water, and the water is a very precious resource for all creation, and in particular us as humankind, we are made of water. So it's one of the sacred elements of gifts of our Mother Earth, and she provides that for us because we need it, because we need it in our systems in order to grow and to be. And you know that old saying that we can survive. We can survive for a very long time without food and without that nourishment, but without water, we are destined to perish. So my father was reflecting on his youth and being a young child, and living in the bush and living with his parents and relatives and my relatives, but just in the identification that he just felt so free. He felt that he can go anywhere without regret. He could go into the bush, he could go to the lake, he could go anywhere. But one in particular spot that he always was fond of was this very nice stream not too far from their homestead, and he was just able to go there. And the reason why he liked going there is because he could walk to that water, up to that stream, and just look at it and look how clean and filtered and just healthy that water was. And he would always say that he could up to that water and take his hands and drink from it without any regret, and without even questioning how fresh and pure that water and clean that water is. And so in his youth, that was just one of his routines, to be able to go to the stream and drink from it. And then he comes to several years later, after being married, having kids, and telling me the story. He started reflecting on stories of from his grandparents. And his grandparents would share stories. We would call them prophecies, visions of the future. And his grandparents had shared a story about the times of changing times in his lifetime. And his grandparents would say, you are going to see some big changes to our land and to the landscape in your lifetime. We won't see it in our lifetime because we're old, but you will see it in your lifetime. And when you see it in your lifetime, you are going to be at the age where we're at, where we're reaching the age of eldership. And it'll be you who will see this and will reflect on this, and you will share your thoughts to your family and to your children and grandchildren. And my father continued telling me the story that they've told him about that in his times he will see people selling water in bottles and in containers, and people were just openly buying it because they needed to drink clean water, because the water nearby or around was not clean anymore. And so my dad always never thought that day would come, and that unfortunate day did come when the waters did become unclean. That stream that he once knew did dry up and was no more. So it became an awakening for him, because he saw a concert with all these young people. With their water bottles, plastic water bottles in the air, and they're just throwing it up in the air in cheer and celebration. And that's what woke him up, is when he saw those water bottles being lifted in the air and just being thrown around and with water everywhere, and made him remember that story that his grandparents shared with them, that this is where he is now in time to what his grandparents had shared with him about the prophecies and visions of our people. So for me to hear that story, he passed it on to me, and other various stories as well. But with that in particular, it carries on to me and into my thoughts, into my reflections, because I reflect on the other side of things, and I come to a realization that I'm never going to experience what my dad experienced in his youth, in his childhood, of being able to walk down from the homestead to that stream and just pick up your hands and drink freely from the stream, some very clean and given water by the earth. And that saddens me, but that is where we are today. And I just wanted to share that story because these are the types of mindsets that has always been in many Indigenous peoples, worlds, communities, and upbringings of these times of these things happening with our land, and where we're at in our relationship with her, because that's very important as well. And I talk about now, and I titled this in the idea of land and relationships, but I also talk about creation in this too. Is because we are in these given times of uncertainty to who we are as a race. And I will say, in my opinion, we only have one race, and that's the human race. We're the humankind. We're not any different from each other than our traditions and beliefs and upbringings, that we all come from the same earth and we are made from the same environment, and we only have one planet. And she's a beaut. She's beautiful. But I'll share this other story too. It was a very recent story. I was joining on the weekend with a spiritual group, a men's spiritual group, and it was very wonderful to join this group and to listen with them from all different denominations and spiritual beliefs. And we were sharing the topic about free will and responsibilities, and more about free will, of what is free will in the context of spirituality and religion and society means. And everyone shared, and I shared my bit too, and I said, well, I kind of went to the topic about talking about the land. An elder once said that free will is not a right, but it's a responsibility. We have a responsibility as free willed humankind creations on this planet, and we need to use it as rightly as we can, and be that voice for our Mother Earth, because she's our mother. Why wouldn't you protect your mother? Why would you not protect this great relationship that we have with the one of the greatest gifts that God gave us to be in relationship with? And I actually extended that and said, you know what? Our Mother Earth is teaching us one thing. We try to create this relationship with her as best we can because we're responsible for her, and she's responsible for us. But at the end of the day, when you think about it, the earth can kill us without regret. And that's one of the greatest gifts that the earth gives us, is the earth teaches us to one, to survive and to learn of her gifts that she has given us, both good and bad. But it's up to us as God's children and children of her, that we are given the opportunity to learn to live, and live rightfully, to live in a good way, to live respectfully. And so with that, many Indigenous peoples, and including myself, we're given the 7 sacred teachings. And with those 7 sacred teachings, or 7 sacred fires, we are taught all these respectful ways because of creation, because of the land that we live on. And we're told these in different ways, but it comes a lot to the same ideas and the same teachings, the core teachings. And I talk about now, And I talk about where we're at now because some very interesting things that we as a species are living with. And that's in particular, I want to first talk about what we're all doing right now on this, what we call this platform we call Zoom. We are forced to live in a virtual reality right now, a virtual world because of what that we call COVID-19, the pandemic and everything that has been, related with it. We're up to 2 years of being in this place of isolation and learning to live in a changed environment. But when you look in between the lines to things, that the land does respond to this, to where we're at as people living here on the lands of Mother Earth. I've noticed even from the probably first few months of COVID back in 2020, that nature, because our physical humankind footprint, even in our metropolitan areas, were quieted. We become silent. We weren't going out as much. People were not going anywhere. Businesses were closed. Things were shut down. Events were canceled. No church services unless it was virtual. We've gone silent, and we didn't participate with our common society in our normal ways and our circumstances. But nature responded to that. Nature started coming out. If you've noticed that, I did notice that here in Vancouver and Burnaby, that animals were starting to come out, more creatures, coyotes even, more of that was happening. Certain places vegetations were starting to grow a little bit better because we weren't in its way. So this is what I mean about relationship too, is that there is a bit of response in even in these times of COVID from nature, from the earth. I've noticed at the early stages of COVID, I was living in Burnaby, and when I was in Burnaby, I was living in a very nice rental house area, and my view of the northern mountains and the inlet was great, but I've noticed these birds start flying by and flying by more and more, and they were herons. Herons were not, their flight path was never in this area, but they came back. They came back. They noticed that we weren't as busy creating the noise pollution or or even maybe even just the air pollution, but they were coming back. Their patterns came back to the area. So, like I said, COVID-19's taught us also that nature does respond to our footprint. That that is something of consideration when we think about relationship with the earth, with the landscape and with land, but with each other as well. The second thing I want to talk about current events is very recent. Over the Christmas break, Christmas holidays, I listened to some news feed, in particular about a group of scientists, world scientists, were now trying to make a call out, an echo to our world leaders, but then also to just society, the international society of whoever would listen, about what's happening with climate change, and that the realisms that's going on with climate change. One scientist in particular really made me feel like finally somebody's actually saying this, and I hope there were various people from across this world listening. But he was talking about Antarctica, and Antarctica. There's a big chunk of Antarctica that's now broken off, and he mentioned that he stated that, and he was not stating that it may happen, or it might happen, or it's going to happen in a few years or so, because we've heard that story already a few years ago, that the glacier pieces of Antarctica are breaking off and starting to move to warmer waters that will melt and change landscape. We've heard that story already, but he was in a statement, it's happened. And that's a very big statement to make, because loud and clear, that means it's happened and we can't go back. There is no way we can go back and duct tape the glacier back to Antarctica. That huge glacier, that big iceberg that's now detached itself from Antarctica, is now in process of moving to warmer waters, melting, and possibly changing those, changing our landscape on our various coasts around this world. So we're in a place of climate change, and we now need to learn and this word of adaptation, that we as a species now need to adapt to the given changes. We are living in it, and we now need to learn how to live with nature in a good way and listen to more of her calls. And it's not a matter of what's been said 20 or 30 years ago. We can't go back and do and say those things anymore, because we're living in it, and we now need to find better ways of understanding of how to live with the current weather trends, the more volcanoes, earthquakes, floods, everything that's happening, weather patterns. We have to live with it, and we now need to adapt and it's sad to say, go into survival mode. And with survival mode, there's always that next thing when I want to talk about survival mode. It becomes very hectic, and very many, and say most Indigenous people, if not all, know that word survival mode, because we've lived in survival mode through generations, most our lives, in order to get and to achieve and be a part of Western society. With survival mode, there is an individual turns to this dictation of an identity of me and I. Becomes very self-sustaining, rather than looking at a group setting. There is no we, there is no us. There is survival mode of I and me. Well, I need to survive in order to achieve, or it's about me and my needs. It's not about us anymore. So we start separating, and that is realistically what is called survival mode. And I will share a story that with this identification of survival mode that is, it breaks my heart every time I think about it. But I talk about our various Indigenous communities across this great land, with the various youth, young adults, and now adults, because our statistics are rising, that are dying, unfortunately, because of suicide. Suicide due to this mode that we've been in for so long. That's survival mode. That we're forced to think of ourselves as being alone, not being able to be ourselves or speak about ourselves, even within our own communities, or even our own families. So many have turned to fentanyl, to drug abuse, to various types of abuses, and it's not right. And it's sad to say, but that is a clear example of being in survival mode. when an individual loses their life because they've seen nothing but me and never experienced a we or an us, and that hurts. And it's hard to not talk about it, and especially to a group of people like yourselves. But that's the realities of our Indigenous communities. Just came off a meeting with the National Indigenous Elders Council, and it was a sad sharing, because many of them were sharing of the many funerals that are happening in their communities. Maybe a few to do with COVID, maybe a few to do with age or ailments, but a lot to do with suicides and people taking their own lives. So that's survival mode, and that's the unfortunates of survival mode. I want to change the subject a little bit now and talk about the United Church and the presence of the Indigenous Church and the Indigenous Church community, and our partaking with the within the United Church, and where we're at, and maybe talk a little bit about the calls to the church. So we do. As the Indigenous Church, we do have the National Indigenous Council and National Indigenous Elders Council, who are our formal leaders within who I work with as within my office with the Indigenous Ministries and Justice Unit, and we work together to be the Indigenous Church and work for our Indigenous communities of faith. And there's various nations of Indigenous people from across Canada. And again, we've been umbrellaed to be Indigenous because we see ourselves as being our distinct Indigenous nation. I'm from the Cree Nation. I don't know what it's like to be Haudenosaunee or to be Gitxsan, because that's a different nation. So I always feel that that there needs to be that understanding that we're being placed to be under this Indigenous umbrella, but we are like I always like to use this example. We are the United Nations of Indigenous peoples. That we are many nations coming together to find equal footing, understandings, and a common language to be a peoples of Indigenous understandings, and to be able to talk to the non-Indigenous communities as well. But within that, we have the calls to the church. And within the calls to the church, which was presented back in 2018, it's the Caretakers Report. And within the calls to the church, there are 9 calls altogether. And within those 9 calls, I like to say that, well, that's something that the non-Indigenous communities need to understand and know, because those calls are for the non-Indigenous in church community to fulfill. We're, as an Indigenous church, are here to evaluate and to see that they get accomplished for the betterment of everyone, and to help build those relationships with the non-Indigenous church community. But in the calls to the church, I do have a critique about it, and I'm going to share it here in a PowerPoint. The calls to the church are very well set out. I'm not going to go into too much detail because they are under the United Church of Canada website and the resources. And you can even Google it and type in calls to the church caretakers report UCC. You'll get the document. But in the calls to the church, it lays out an introduction to to the calls, who we are as a people, who we are as a church, and what we stand for healing. And then it goes on to talk about the earth and about our relationship with the earth. And that's probably my one critique to the caretaker's report, is that, in my opinion, that portion of when we talk about the earth should be the very first one, because in my opinion, the earth and the land are our church, and that's our first church, and that's our first understanding of who we are. And that should be the first thing that we talk about when we're talking about any types of calls as a people. And I want to share just a very small clip of that that calls to the church here. I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully I'm going to be doing this right. And let me know if you can see it. I'm having a hard time.
Yes, we can.
You can. Okay, well, I'm just going to see if I can, oops. I'm just looking for how to switch it to the...
Go to slideshow, Marie, on the right side.
Slideshow.
The slideshow at the top beside animations. See, it says home, insert, draw, design, transitions, slideshow over on the right side of it.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay,
I can't, it's hard to see because of the bar, the zoom bar on top. I can't see the heading. So here we go. There we go. I think I got it now.
Yes.
Great. All right, excellent. Thank you. So this is just a clip of the calls of the church, in particular, talking about our I guess our statement about the earth, about the planet. So the earth is a provider. The earth is our ground of being. The earth is our mother. The earth is our sustenance. The earth is our Eden. Creator made us from our mother, the earth. Access to the earth has been stolen from us, and others now eat from her provisions. We have been marginalized and separated from our own lands. It was stolen from us by a false doctrine of discovery. And this doctrine was repudiated by the United Church. We must return to the provisions of the land. The land will sustain us, has for millennia. So that's just the first paragraph of that section when we talk about the earth. It does carry on, talks a little bit more about what that connection is, and then, you know, it really is that when we talk about the earth, we talk about our connection to it, then we talk about ourselves as a people and what the earth gave us. It gave us life, but it gave us languages and gave us ways of being in our given areas of the land. So within, I can say within the indigenous ways of being, we've in the Cree ways of being, we definitely have different languages within our or I should say different dialects within our own language, and those dialects, there's about 6 dialects in our Cree language, because we vast from the interior of BC across the prairies all the way to northern Quebec. And we have 6 dialects of Cree languages, and we don't all speak the same languages, but because of our given area, the land gives us the language, and that gives us that connection. The land the creation gives us a way to speak for ourselves in the area, but there's similarities. So there are distinctions within who we are as within our own nations as well, and different ways of knowing what governance is and structures are. And again, it's a varied way of being when we then include the identification of church, and then, you know, within our cultural ways and our spiritual ways. But it's all relationship. It all comes to relationship. I can say that for the various First Nations people within the church is we all understand this idea that we need to have relationships or we won't survive. Back to the survival mode, because that's been implanted in us for several generations, even to when, in the beginnings with Mother Earth, she's teaching us of survival. But there comes a point where we need to go beyond survival and live in good relationships and not have to worry about how we are going to live, but live in harmony. And that's a Cree teaching. When we talk about harmony, and we talk about harmony in the Cree way, we talk that we live in both the physical world and the spiritual world, and that's a relationship within ourselves and around us. Is that if you're living too much of a spiritual life, that means that your physical life is suffering. And if you're living too much in the physical world and the physical means, that means that your spiritual life is suffering. So you need to balance it out and bring the two together so that it's in hand, and that brings balance, and that brings you harmony. And that's the basis of living your life in a good way, and being in a good way is being mindful of that. And those spiritual and physical balances, well, those are teachings from the earth, because that's what the earth teaches us. So there is so many connections, interconnections to what we stand for on this planet, within the earth. I thought, I just share that bit with the calls of the church. But again, like I said, you can find that on the website, United Church website. And I wanted to just carry on to two more things before I go to questions. And I do hope I'm doing good for time, but because I'm looking at my time, I think I'm good. But I'll keep sharing here. I wanted to talk now on kind of the theological, kind of in the Christian thoughts. And when I think about nature and what I've learned also through Scripture, I'm always thinking about the book of Luke, and in particular Luke 4 verses 1 through 14. Jesus going into the wilderness, and this is where in the New Testament we see this teaching and this different identification of land and creation, where Jesus is tested by the devil in the wilderness, and then is tested again, standing at the I believe top of the mountain, and then he's tested 3 times. But it's the wilderness part. The very first test is what I think about, where Jesus is sent out into the wilderness to be in the wilderness. And I guess from the context of the scripture, it's meant that he's gone to the wild. He's gone to the wild beings of the earth, and the earth is this untamed, almost like this untamed creature. Yes and no. Again, it's really based on your teachings, because the earth is there to teach us to live and to survive and to be in connection and harmony with her. So Jesus, to me, already has that understanding, already knows that that the wilderness is just a part of who I am, and this is part of what I take from it as well. But Jesus in the wilderness is always one of the first things I think about when I think about this identification. And maybe, and this could be maybe brought up in conversation later, is maybe where this identification that the earth is not a part of us, that we're distinctly different from the earth, and we're segregated already by teachings of scripture in this way. And then I want to go back a little bit, because the Old Testament kind of teaches that a little bit differently, because we talk about creation in the book of Genesis, and the book of Genesis talks about us being birthed from the land, and that we are part of the earth, and that all creation was created by the great mystery, by our Creator. And so that it also brings in another understanding of being in this part of nature, because that's what we are, is a part of nature. So there's so many things we can talk about when we talk about scripture in the Bible, but I always find that when we talk about the wilderness, and I think about the wilderness, I think about, yes, that's wonderful, because when Jesus goes into wilderness, it's like he's going on if I'm thinking, and I think about it in my Cree way, is he's going on a vision quest. He's going out there to learn something, learn about himself, get a vision, get an understanding, and by him talking to the devil, that means he's talking to some form of spirit being. So there are, for me, there are those other types of connections, and I always find that as Indigenous people, we can find those types of connections, and that brings great dialogue into what we need as people of many nations, sharing this land together on this great Mother Earth, and we need to continue to do that. I'll just share a quick notation about my thoughts on Jesus in the wilderness too. So in that scripture of Luke 4:1-14, we see Jesus go into the wilderness, into a place where one goes for connection, understanding, and guidance of one's path, and that being physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And as it says in the scripture, he was led to the wilderness, guided by the Spirit. And this is where one faces one's truth, the good, the bad, the torment, and the bliss, and come to terms with the understanding God has placed as true vision to the right path one is to embark. And this path may lead to understanding, also to a life of pain and sometimes death, but the vision one receives when one goes into the wilderness is what one always fears and must accept with humbleness: the truth. The vision that one takes with the Creator is a blessing. You see, Jesus has some decisions to make now that he's given a direction, a path to what and who he's meant to be. He is awakened to the Spirit of the Creator and to the connection of the land, our mother. Without this exploration and test, Jesus would not be able to understand why he must take the path that would create a place of salvation for Christians across this world. Our path is not for us to judge, but to accept with love and understanding from the great mystery. So I want to just conclude my presentation tonight with two things here. The first thing I wanted to say is, as Indigenous people, in various ways and throughout history, in many different generations, we've been romanticized as a group of people, and that's, for me, is not what I just said. Is not accepting or understanding the truth. But what we're doing here tonight, by you allowing me to express myself and express my understandings as a Cree person, in particular, I like to say Nihiao. This is one way that it breaks this romanticized understanding of Indigenous people. And I'm going to share my screen again, and hopefully I can do this without any regrets. And it's just kind of a bit of my last my last bit of advice that I can honestly share with you from my understandings. No, it's not gonna. There we go. And this is just something that I had put together that, you know, for me comes from my heart. When we talk about our Creator, about God, we talk about the land, and we talk about our relationship. And our relationship is quite vast with the land, with Creator, with each other. That we need to continue this dialogue. We need to continue creating a language we all can relate to and understand in a good way. But I just want to leave you with this, because I think this is my general advice to you as my relations tonight is: listen to the land. She's speaking. When you take that time just to listen to the land, you know, go out to nature, sit outside on your deck, or go for the walk, go to the beach, go outside to even to shovel snow. Take a moment and just to listen to the land, because she's speaking to you. And she's speaking to you in many ways. And then when that happens, you have an opportunity to continue that relationship and then speak to the land, because she is listening. She does respond. It may not be the response that you were looking for or thinking was going to happen, but she responds in the way of the Creator, in that mysterious way. But she'll teach us in a good way. So I could say is love creation, because that is Creator, that is God. All of creation, all of us here are visions and gifts of creation and Creator. And I say love creation because creation loves you. And that's a big thing. Creation loves you. God loves you. The land loves you. And we love each other. And I always think of that as being Jesus' greatest commandments. Love others as you would want to be loved. And I think I will stop there.
My goodness, Murray, where to begin to say thank you? I think that we probably could have listened for days and not come to the bottom.
I could have talked all night. I'm just going to say.
No, that's not what I meant. What I meant is we probably could have listened for days and not even begun to come to even seeing, you know, the end of what you could teach us. So thank you so much for beginning that journey with us, for giving us some hints, some intriguing methods and ways to go about it. I know that I personally am going to immediately go and get that caretaker's report from the website and see what that all has to say. And for teaching us, for challenging us, for suggesting to us that we start listening in a different way to the land and expecting that the land will speak to us and that we can speak to her. So thank you so much for all that you've given us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I know we've got some questions. I actually received a couple of questions before you even got here tonight. So one of the questions that I will start with is, how can non-Indigenous people be better allies and supporters for Indigenous issues?
Okay.
How can we do that?
How to become better allies? Well, and support. Well, various ways. You do know of the various things that are happening with Indigenous people across Canada, in particular. You know, be that advocate in ways of livelihood, in particular with a lot of our communities having to deal with sadly, but with water and boiling water and things like that that are just just a common everyday thing in this country, and we're still dealing with water issues in our various First Nation communities across Canada, and it's those are that's just a very subtle way of saying advocate for proper. I don't want to say clean, they even just proper drinking water in various ways through governments, but also just to open, how can we, how you can be better allies is um, I guess I think about what an elder always says: walk with me. Just recently had a talk with an elder, and that was one of the things she would say is walk with me. We need to walk together. Um, if I'm suffering, at some point you're going to suffer too. But we need to walk together to understand each other. Um, Share these kind of stories, the good and bad stories. Not The idea is our history is told differently, and I think that is one way that we need one thing that we need to remember is that the way we hold history is differently, and we need sometimes we need to get out of a certain mind frame and re-educate ourselves to a different way of listening or a different way of understanding. So don't be afraid to do that, but also approach relationship in a new way. Um, or even just start relationship. Don't be afraid to talk to somebody. Don't be afraid to talk to an Indigenous person in your own given community, because I'm sure they're willing to share. But again, I say that with caution, because sometimes, as Indigenous people, we're missing one thing, and right now it's trust. We've many hurt people in this Indigenous country is across the lands because of unmarked graves and the continuation of finding more unmarked graves. Even in situations like that, just be a supporter to see that these are happening and talk about it. Talk about it with your own communities. Talk about, what the findings were in Williams Lake, what the findings were in Kamloops and Saskatchewan, and we're going to see more, but understand that that there needs to be a built trust amongst people, and that's pretty much a cornerstone to any relationship. And just remember that again, another elder friend said this to somebody who asked the same question. It's like, well, I'm not asking you for money, that if that's what you're thinking. What I'm asking for is, remember that I'm human too. That just treat me as another human being, and I will treat you the same. And that's what we need. Is we just need to understand that there needs to be a balance of equity amongst people, that we see each other as gifted and loving people.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to just remind our participants, my apologies, I meant to mention earlier on before you began speaking, Murray, that as questions arise, you're welcome to enter them in chat so that we can share them with Murray. So feel free to do that now, and then we can flag those for anyone who would like to stay on past our time with more questions. There's one that is here in the chat from Stephen Lowe. He says, thank you, Murray, for your words. The doctrine of discovery was repudiated by the United Church, but it certainly seems governments have not done so. However, do you feel that it is getting better, or one step forward, or is it one step forwards, two steps back kind of thing? How would you, it's sort of,
Well, yeah, 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 I think it's going in many directions, like a square dance. Actually, we seem to we do go forward, we do go back, we keep going forward. Two steps, we go. It is, it's all over the place. And again, because like I just mentioned, this identification of trust. We find some connection, we find some relationship or relationship building, but then we then lose a little bit because government does something else. It doesn't come to a full fruition to something, and then things with, like I mentioned, the unmarked graves happens, and that brings greater mistrust. And so it just becomes this whole this dance that we keep going back and forth. It becomes very sensitive, remembering too that when a lot of the concerns with residential schools, day schools, and unmarked graves happens, that creates a lot of trauma in people. And it breaks down a person's ability to want to participate properly in any type of dialogue or talks. People start shutting down. But yes, government, government is government. I never like talking about government. I used to work for the government, so I know a bit about government, some of bureaucracies, but that's the thing is, I always tread carefully when it comes to government and what government says, because it's you sometimes you do go in with a little bit of caution, because of past instances, and from what your community and your parents or grandparents have told you in the past of what happened to our people. Be careful, really, really, really read between the lines. An elder also told me this thing, especially when we talk about things with people, we kind of have that intuition. Maybe we shouldn't trust this person. Well, you look beyond that person. You look to who's behind this person, and really see what's at the table, not just what's in front of you. So the idea is, take that with a grain of salt, investigate, research, find out really what is at hand. I also want to add in too that with the TRC, I was very happy to see that happen in 2015, and then there was a kickoff to much truth and reconciliation. Everyone talked about reconciliation, but everybody I found forgot the truth in the TRC. And to this day, since Kamloops, that was the truth. It came out. It finally came out. And that was what was missing with truth and reconciliation. So now we're living with both, and so now we're starting to feel that this is a different progression to understanding each other, building that trust, and building that relationship.
Thank you. I don't know, do we have any more questions in the chat here? Let me take a peek. I'm not seeing.
While we're waiting, I'll just add one. I was quite intrigued, Murray, by your reading and rereading of the temptation story in the wilderness, and the way you drew us to the silence in the text, the way it doesn't really explicitly name that relationship with creation. And as you were speaking, I was mindful of the fact that, isn't it curious that we only find a tempter there? And you talked about Jesus speaking with spirit beings, and I wonder if there are other spirit beings in that place as well, offering some of those messages that you were sharing about the land, right? That the land loves us, that the land can sustain us. Like, so I was really intrigued and wanted to thank you for that more expansive reading of that narrative.
Oh, you're welcome, Lionel. Thank you.
And I must say, I'm really doing a lot of thinking about, oh, there's Mary Margaret Walters. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Thank you, Murray. I want to go back to what you said about that our land has been stolen by the false doctrine of discovery, and that doctrine has been repudiated by the United Church. Either I was unaware or ignorant, or probably both. Can you tell us a little about how that repudiation took place, and what does it really mean?
Well, I believe it was with the last moderator, Jordan Cantwell, that really brought that into fruition to repudiate the doctrine of discovery when she was our moderator for the United Church. I can't give too much detail on exactly the full scope of it all, but the idea is that we, as the United Church, are trying to live against what has been stated with the doctrine of discovery. That we were working on a placement to work in better relationship together, creating a better relationship for Indigenous peoples, and our placement, and recapturing our who we are as a people as best can be. And the church is needing to go into some repentance to what the church has done to the many Indigenous peoples across Canada. And really, we're in very early stages of this this pathway and working towards it. It is about repenting. The idea is about repenting, the wrongs that the missions have done into Indigenous people since since Columbus, as they say. Hence the doctrine of discovery is noted with. The idea is to create the relationships, but also to fulfill some apologies, but some clear understanding that what I hope for is being respected as Indigenous peoples, being respected as who we are, people. There's so much with the doctrine discovery that that's so much laid into the Western society. Our laws, for one of them, we are our ways of living as Canadian society is in that. I think part of this approach, which is this identification of Indigenous people being sovereign people, us being considered sovereign nations of peoples, which is not recognized by through government, which is basically we as Western society, as Canadian society, we uphold the government and the laws, and if we're upholding our laws that state that don't state Indigenous people as actually being sovereign people, then we're not considered people. So this also is in relation to what's been upheld with the doctrine of discovery. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. We do have one more question. I think this should probably be our last question so that we honor your time. And so the question is, do you feel the 1986 apology from the United Church will be accepted in the near future, or is there still a lot of work to do in our church?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. The 1986 apology, and then the second apology, but which happened too in the 90s. I had actually a discussion with the National Indigenous Council about this, and this was prior, just a few months prior to Kamloops happening, and we were working on actually the calls at the church and on evaluations of the caretaker's report, and this actually came up about the apologies. Well, what about our apologies? Well, by the various Indigenous membership that was at the council meeting felt that it's well, we haven't really accepted it because we never went back to it. We never gone back to looking at it. And I think at that time it was thought that, well, I think maybe it's time we should and go back to this apology and reevaluate that, because it's been several generations since that apology's been there. We need to revisit it and see if it can be truly accepted in a good way and in a new way. But then Kamloops happened, and so a lot of triggers, a lot of trauma, a lot of uncertainty happened, and a broken tie in relationship then occurs. So right now it just seems that, and I've made mention to this to some of our leadership, is that, well, any type of work that we were doing as in bridging and creating relationship with the settler community, with the non-Indigenous church community, it's all changed now. All those ties are a bit broken down. We need to actually start anew. We need to create new relationships, because there's new things at the table, new concerns, and we need to start this relationship building again. And sometimes, in a way, it might not be a bad thing, but it does mean that we need to start anew, and we need to bring all these identities, these concerns, and new dialogue to the table, because the apology was set in that generation, and we have new people, a new generation of Indigenous people, but also within the church, that are having different identifications of being church and being spiritual, and wanting to claim this identity of being Christian as well. And we all need to remember that there's that also invoked into this thoughts of the apology.
Thank you very much. I think that we should probably stop there, because it's, I think, 8:45 or something like that. Yeah, it is. Thank you so much again for your candor and your really gentle way of speaking truth to all of us. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.